I don't know how this tape came into my possession. All I know is that I found it in one of my drawers while I was cleaning them out, in preparation for moving to a new house. It was a VHS tape, with a plain white label on it. Recess R1109, new, return to C, was written on it in thin black permanent marker. Whoever wrote it had very poor penmanship. It was honestly barely legible. Like anyone who had watched Recess as a child, nostalgia overcame me. I placed the tape in an old VCR and pressed play. It began with a blue screen. It stayed like that for a few minutes and then started flashing red. 30 seconds later, it cut to black. Thinking that the tape was wrecked, I went over to press eject before I reached the button. The Recess opening started, albeit with really poor compression quality. The video was blurry and the audio was muddy, but I kept watching to see if anything weird would happen. The episode The Rules started, and began playing out like the television broadcast version. Since the previous owner apparently took poor care of this tape, the vertical hold became progressively worse as it went on. Another thing that was off was the voice acting. The voices seemed to randomly fluctuate in quality, even in the middle of sentences. For example, in one sentence, Gus would sound like himself, and the next it would sound like the voice actor really didn't want to even be there. The animation was technically sound, with the exception of some of the facial expressions. In certain scenes, the main characters' faces didn't match with the expressions they were trying to convey. In these particular scenes, TJ looked angry, Vince looked tired, Spillane looked anxious, Gretchen looked depressed, Mikey looked high and complete with bloodshot eyes, and Gus looked like he was genuinely hated everyone around him. A couple of minutes in, and the episode completely jumped the tracks and went insane. At the scene where Vince was ordered to go into the dumpster to find a piece of fruit, it was taking him longer to find it than he should have. Then the sound of the garbage truck could be heard. Guys? Gus said. Everyone turned and saw the garbage truck. Everyone except TJ ran. TJ tried to help Vincent get out, but eventually failed and ran away. The garbage truck picked up the dumpster and emptied its contents, including Vince, and began to crush him. Vincent's screams and the sound sounded incredibly genuine, like the person doing his voice was actually being crushed to death. The whole time, everyone was looking in shock. When the screaming ceased, Randall began crying for a moment and ran off yelling, "Miss Finster!" like he always did. Everyone else started crying and the scene faded to black. 30 seconds later, the scene abruptly cut to TJ walking home with his hands over his eyes. There was no sound at all at this part. The animation had dropped in quality like it was done by someone in their basement, as opposed to a professional animation studio. It focused on TJ walking down the large road for a couple of minutes, with the vertical hold getting worse the whole time. After a while, it cut to TJ lying in bed, crying quietly. It was a genuine, quiet cry, too. I could really hear the pain in his voice. Rather than cutting to black after the scene ended, it showed remaining 5 students walking to school in the rain. None of them even cared about being drenched. In addition to some cuts and bruises, Mikey looked even more bloated than usual. Gretchen's glasses were shattered, Spillane's hair was dirty and all over the place, Gus was wearing a black sweatshirt as opposed to his usual getup, and TJ's hat was on, but the bill facing forwards. They were all incredibly depressed. The vertical hold was so bad at this point that I could barely tell what was going on. It looked like the remaining children were just sitting in the class, occasionally cutting to an empty desk. Finally, the vertical hold finally calmed down to the point where I could see. The depressing, mundane atmosphere went on until Gus pulled out a pen. He rammed it through his eye. TJ tried to stop him, but Gus ended up bleeding out, and he fell over dead. Blood continuously dripped down from this desk and pooled onto the floor. Nobody else seemed to care. Everyone went to lunch after that. Mikey gorged himself on whatever he could find until eventually he grabbed his chest and rolled around on the floor screaming. Ultimately, his eyes rolled in the back of his head. He twitched once and then stopped moving. TJ barely tried to help this time. Nevertheless, he still became more depressed after Mikey died. The scene then cut to the playground again. TJ and Spinelli were kicking a can back and forth, both expressing minimal interest in what they were doing. They looked like they were on the verge of killing themselves as well. Gretchen silently walked past them and began climbing up Old Rusty. When she was at the top, she got ready to jump off. What was especially strange was that instead of looking depressed, the kids at the playground, with the exception of TJ and Spillane, were shouting angrily at Gretchen. Most of them were chanting, "Do it! Jump!" or something similar. Randall called Miss Finster, and even she came over and joined in on the chanting. "We've got to stop her!" yelled TJ, and he and Spillane ran over and climbed to the top. TJ tried to get Spillane to help pull Gretchen to safety inside of the platform at the top of Old Rusty. Instead, however, Spillane simply glanced at him with a pained facial expression. She then stood up next to Gretchen, pulled a rope out of her pocket, and tied the ankles together. TJ begged and pleaded with them. "Don't do it! Come back inside!" Gretchen and Spillane looked at each other, closed their eyes, and jumped off. They splattered into bloody bits when they hit the asphalt. TJ leaned onto a bar and began loudly sobbing. The crowd below was becoming angrier still, despite being covered in the blood of Gretchen and Spillane. The crowd began screaming, "Jump, fucker! Do it, you little fag! Come on, you little bitch!" and other phrases to that effect. TJ just curled up and covered his face. When the bell rang, everyone but TJ went inside. The screen was black for several seconds. After a few moments of fast-forwarding to see if there was anything else, the scene faded to TJ sitting on the edge of his bed crying. There was an ambient sound of what I recognized as a tornado off in the distance, though outside the window everything appeared normal. Throughout the scene, the tornado got louder and TJ's crying got more pained. Eventually, the tornado's sound stopped. TJ lifted up a handgun from under his pillow, aimed it at his temple, and closed his eyes. Then, one more tear slipped out as he pulled the trigger. Cartoony blood splattered all over the place, and the scene of TJ's corpse was shown for a few seconds until the tape abruptly cut to black. I heard what sounded like a telephone dialing, and then the tape stopped completely. I wound up selling that damn thing on eBay, and I never wanted to see it again. Maybe the guy who brought it will upload it to YouTube or something, but I didn't even want to watch it a second time to capture the footage. One time was all I needed to get every detail. I don't know if Recess production crew made this as some sort of joke, or if it was made by some guy with too much time on his hands, but I don't give a damn anymore. I just don't want to see it again. I'll never be able to really watch Recess in the same way again. That I promise. Hello there, my little shadows. It's me again, your master, the Shadow Reader. I hope you all enjoyed this little tale of horror. I honestly hope I didn't traumatize you too much after this. If you're new here and want to become one of my little shadows, then hit that subscribe button down below, and also make sure to turn on post notifications so that you can be the first to watch my brand new content when it comes out. Until then, sweet dreams, my little shadows.